institutions and who played a significant role in solving the terrorist phenomenon in Northern Ireland.
Eric, thank you very much for the kind welcome and the kind invitation to come and participate in this meeting. I don't speak as someone who has any particular expertise in the dilemma of the Hazara people, but I come on my own behalf and on behalf of the all-party parliamentary group on conflict issues to express our concern and our solidarity with you in this problem. And so I'm going to listen to what a number of other colleagues say about the specifics of this situation, but if I might make just one or two comments about the general dilemma that you face. The first thing is that most people in this country do not really know about the plight of the Hazara. This is not one of those conflicts where people are familiar with it. Of course, even if they're familiar, it doesn't necessarily mean the problem gets resolved. But if they don't even know about the problem, then that's a serious dilemma. And the truth is the Hazara people have had discrimination and prejudice and attacks upon them for a very long time. It's not just in our lifetime. This is something that goes back in fact hundreds of years. And one of the problems about this is that when any community of people, a particular minority community, becomes effectively a kind of scapegoat, it increasingly becomes permissible to attack them. There's a process that goes on of dehumanizing of people, where they are spoken about as though they weren't really human beings, where they weren't really people who should be respected. And this happens in all sorts of places in the world. You know, I find it difficult to recall, but Aboriginal people in Australia, for example, were only legally regarded as full human beings a matter of a few decades ago, not hundreds of years ago, but a few decades ago. Up until then, legally, they were not regarded as full human beings. And of course, Jewish people throughout the centuries have often been scapegoated and dehumanized. And when this happens, when a group of people are treated in this way, when they become dehumanized over a period of time, it's not that their humanity is diminished, it is that it becomes permissible to treat them as though they were not fully human beings. And then you can do whatever you like. It's the first disastrous step. And we can see it in the things that people say, as well as in the things that they do. And when people speak in ways which are dismissive of people, dehumanizing of people, where they don't give them their proper place and their proper respect, it's the first step to deeply unpleasant things happening. And then when those things happen, it becomes more possible for something else to happen. And this is a very dangerous road, but it's a road that Hazara people have clearly experienced, tragically so. And then the third thing is that when you get a wider context that facilitates these kinds of things, when people begin to believe that it is acceptable to speak in sectarian terms more widely, and regard antagonism between large groups of people as being the way it is, then this creates a context where individual minorities can then be abused in a very gross way. Now, all of these things are present in the situation for the Hazara people. First of all, as I say, people in this country are not really familiar with the problem. And in addressing that, the kind of meeting that you're having this evening is absolutely the right thing to do. It's not an easy process, because there are so many areas of the world where horrible things are happening that you've got a real competition to just raise the flag, as it were, and say, look, please pay attention to this. But having meetings like this and finding ways of getting the message out, and I'll come back to this in a minute, but using, for example, social media, this is really very important. It's not easy, there's no quick fix to it, and it's something you've got to keep on doing, because people's attention span, certainly the attention of government, but actually the attention span of people in general is quite short. They pay attention, oh yes, that's absolutely right, this is a terrible thing altogether, oh my goodness, here's another terrible thing, and another terrible thing. And you've got to keep dragging people's attention back, otherwise you lose it. So the first thing is that people don't know about it, and therefore bringing their attention to it again and again and again is really important. The second thing is this process of dehumanisation. Once this beds in, it really is a very difficult problem to address. But again, I think you are doing the right thing, because you're taking the individual stories, in this case the story of Sahar, and you're saying, here's a person, here's a real person, here's somebody who you can identify with, a young person, lively, vital person, and then this horrible thing is done. How terrible that is to a human being, to a person. Here's the photograph. And so you're doing exactly the right thing again. You're trying to reverse the process of dehumanization by emphasizing not just the numbers of people. Once you start speaking in terms of the numbers of people who are being abused, people's eyes glaze over. One of the results of globalization is that there are so many people, there are so many things that money doesn't mean anything, because unless you're talking in trillions, it's nothing at all. The population of the world is so large, the number of conflicts are so great, that actually when you talk in terms of figures, it ought to be shocking, but it isn't really. And in fact, you even find on the television news nowadays that more and more the reportage is of what's happening to one or two individual people. And you might say, well, my goodness me, why do you do that? Look at how many people are being damaged and destroyed. But one of the reasons is because television people realise that if you speak in terms of huge numbers of things happening, nobody pays any attention. It just glazes over. It's just numbers. Whereas if you start to speak about human interest, then you attract people's attention. But also, in your case, you reverse the process of dehumanization. These are real people. And these are young and vital people whose lives are being lost. And so that's the second thing. And the third thing, which was referred to by Lord Alderdice, is this process of sectarianism, and how over a period of time it has become increasingly acceptable in certain communities in the world to not just speak positively about your own community and what it believes, but to speak negatively about other communities. And we know that there are very wealthy countries in the Middle East that have put large amounts of money into promulgating a doctrine which is not just promoting their own view, but is dismissive of the views and the beliefs of other people. And this is a very dangerous business indeed. Now, you can't easily change people's beliefs about these things when they get into a way of believing. But you can begin to make it very unpopular to speak in that kind of way. At home in my part of the world, we weren't under any illusions that by putting certain pieces of legislation into place and by making it, frankly, unfashionable to speak in a prejudiced and bigoted and sectarian way, we didn't believe that that was going to stop people feeling sectarian. But what it did do was, it put some kind of restraint on. People began saying, oh, I better not say that because I'll not be well regarded for that. And I think one of the problems is that some of the major countries in the Middle East have not had their misbehaviour in this regard pointed out. People are not aware of it. They don't think about it. And one of the things that struck me is you see these absolutely horrible videos of people being beheaded. But nobody says that there are some countries in the Middle East that are doing this all the time as part of their legal process. Nobody says it. And all sorts of other things are happening in some of these countries as well, and it's not being pointed out. Now, John has quite rightly pointed out that you can bring it to government's attention, and there are things that government can do when it is meeting with the Pakistan government and so on and so on. And that's very important. And working in this building, I wouldn't in any way diminish the importance of bringing it to parliamentary attention and bringing it to governmental attention and using whatever diplomatic levers and so on. But one of the things that's very clear to many of us who work in this building is the limit on the power that you've got there. And what is becoming increasingly powerful is the power of social media. And that is something that you can access. It's not a question of money, it's a question of enthusiasm, expertise, and creativity, and energy, and determination to get the message out in whatever way you can. You do have to think about who you're trying to get the message out to. You're trying to get it out to ordinary people. It's very important. You're trying to get it out to NGOs who will be levers that they will use. Absolutely. Are you trying to get it out to those who impact on multinational corporations which decide it wouldn't look well for us to be engaged with this government or with this country because of their human rights record, because of what they're doing or what they aren't doing, and therefore you begin to have a leverage effect on multinational corporations. And of course, on governments and on parliamentarians in different parts of the world. And social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google. There are lots of ways in which it is possible to get these messages out and to get the pictures and to confront people with the humanity of those who are being abused and how unnecessary it is. Now, this is not going to be easy because the world we're living in now is a very dangerous, horrible place. The boundaries are being dissolved and inhuman treatment is appearing all over the place, to the point it's, I said to one of my colleagues recently, up to about 3 years ago, I could kind of keep my fingers on not as many buttons as Eric. He's notorious for the number of things that he can keep involved in. But I could keep my fingers on a number of the major areas. It's impossible to keep up with one of them now, because the pace of change and the rate of deterioration is absolutely shocking. And you know, and therefore I don't bring you a message which says, you know, hope is just around the corner and it's going to be straightforward and exactly here's what to do. Because although it is true that these conflicts and this nastiness is not truly those who are thoughtful, sophisticated, committed believers of any particular religious group, nevertheless, when you end up in these sectarian conflicts and they are given a religious flavour or tinge, that adds to the dangerousness of the mixture. I used to say at home in Northern Ireland, you know, the IRA was not campaigning for the recognition of transubstantiation. It wasn't a question of some religious doctrinal question that was being promulgated. And when the Pope came and said in Ireland, I'm on my bended knees pleading with you to stop, they didn't pay a blind bit of notice to it. Nevertheless, religion became a badge, religious groupings became a badge for other kinds of almost more tribalistic kind of behaviour. And you don't resolve that by doctrinal disputes or discussing whether or not these are truly believers. You've got to address these other more political and sometimes quite primitive issues. But what I say is that what you are doing is absolutely the right thing to do. Bring it to people's attention. Humanise it rather than allow the dehumanisation to take place. Try to keep it in front of people's attention. Confront the wickedness of sectarian language that leads to sectarian behaviour, that leads to the atrocities that we see, and continuing to bring that to people's attention. These are difficult challenges, and they're not challenges that will be any easier next week or the week afterwards, but there isn't any other way to go. And I just want to say that from the point of view of the all-party group on conflict issues, in this, we are with you in the struggle.
Thank you very much, John. I must say that your final words echo with me when you talk about confronting the wickedness of hate speech, because I think hate speech bears a heavy share of the blame for what's happening in Balochistan and in Pakistan. And the fact that, as has already been mentioned, these organisations like LEJ, TTE, so on, ASWJ, they feel free to attack the Hazaras, the Shia people, in language which is utterly atrocious and which doesn't bring down any penalty for those attacks. And this is one reason why the International Imam Hussein Council has been trying to enlist the support of the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion at the United Nations in Geneva, for bringing an international dimension into what has so far, as you say, received very little attention in the domestic press of other countries.